Effortless English by Hoge. Chapter 2. The Problem with Schools. By teaching experience in different parts of the world, I was convinced that something is wrong with English education. Everywhere I went, it was the same situation. The students were bored, frustrated, stressed, and nervous. Most students, even after years of studying, fail to speak the language fluently. We are not alone because it's a global problem. One of my students, Seiko from Japan, described this combination of failure and stress as English trauma. Seiko said that she hated English. She felt that learning English was boring and stressful, and speaking English was even worse. In fact, the thought of speaking to a native speaker immediately made Seiko feel extremely nervous and shy. Seiko felt she had developed a psychological problem with English and had named it English trauma. Trauma is a deep wound or injury. I thought myself that so many people now think of English as a kind of injury or mental disease. Throughout my teaching career, I met many students who had similar feelings about English. I discovered that Seiko was not alone. Rather, English trauma is a global pandemic. Traumas people feel they must learn to speak English. Very few seem to enjoy it. Most who learn the language struggle with the same feelings of nervousness and frustration that Seiko had. As I encountered this problem more and more, I began to look for the root causes. I realized that before I found the solution, I need to understand the problem. Just a doctor must first diagnose a disease before treating it. Think about it. What is the cause of all this misery and failure? Why do so many people fail to speak English effortlessly despite years of study? What is wrong with English education? The first and most obvious problem I found with school was the way in which they teach English. Most schools everywhere in the world use the grammar translation method. As the name implies, the focus of this method is on grammar analysis and the memorization of translated vocabulary. This method breaks English into an endless series of grammar formulas to memorize. Of course, each grammar formula has exceptions, and must be memorized too. Schools like the grammar translation method because it appears to be serious, academic, and complex. The grammar translation method fits the way schools teach most subjects, with textbooks, lecture, notes, memorization, and tests. The only problem, as you know, is that it doesn't work in real conversation. There simply is no time to think about grammar formulas and their exceptions. The failure rate of this method, therefore, is absolutely horrible. Despite the failure of most students to speak English fluently, schools continue to use this method. This is an epic failure for our education system. But recently, because students find the grammar translation method so boring, some schools have added communication activities to their curriculum. Occasionally, the teacher puts the student into a pair of groups. The students then read or repeat dialogue from a textbook. Sometimes they might answer a few questions from a worksheet. Of course, these activities are unnatural, nothing like a real English conversation. Consequently, the failure rate of communication activities is just as bad as grammar translation. But obviously, the English teaching method used in school does not work. That was easy to see. I knew it, the students knew it, and many teachers know it too. Too few will admit it. However, as I continued to investigate the problem with schools, I found even deeper problems in the education system. These problems are less obvious but, in many ways, far more damaging to the students. I call these problems our hidden curriculum because they are the hidden lessons taught by schools. The hidden curriculum. Most schools everywhere in the world share a similar hidden curriculum. One element of this curriculum is student passivity. In school, students are trained to be passive, not active. They sit in chairs in rows. When they are young, they are told to be quiet and obey the teacher. As the teacher lectures, the students take notes. Later, they are told to memorize these notes in preparation for a test. The message is clear. Learning is a passive active. You listen to the teacher, you take notes, you memorize the notes, The problem is that speaking English is not a passive activity. You must connect with other people. You must constantly ask and answer questions. You must communicate ideas, emotions, and descriptions. You must be ready for unexpected. You must be spontaneous. You must actively interact. English is not something you passively study, it's something you do. Related to the problem of passivity is the issue of energy. Sitting for a long time is a low energy activity. The longer you sit, the more your energy drops. As your energy drops, so does their concentration. What's worse, we know that some learners need physical movement in order to learn effectively. These people are called kinesthetic learners. The truth is, we are all kinesthetic learners to some degree because we all benefit from physical movement. School sticks us in chairs and drain our energy, and eventually, an inactive body leads to an inactive mind. The one right answer mentally. One of the greatest flaws of school education is the idea of one right answer. One right answer is a powerful part of the hidden curriculum. It is a resulting of using textbooks and tests. In school, you're frequently taught that there is one and only correct answer to a question or problem. For example, you may be asked to choose the correct verb tense on a test, or you may be taught proper English greetings. The hidden message is that the teacher's way is always right. Real life and real English is not this way. For example, sometimes I will tell a story using the present tense, even though the events happened in the past. This is a technique commonly used by native speakers. However, when English learners hear these stories, many are confused and upset. They are convinced that past tense is the right answer and the only correct way to tell a story. Some get quite upset and even argue without me about it. These students are so convinced that there's only one right answer and they will argue with native speakers. The students have been trained to believe that there's only one correct way to say things in English. The truth is, there are always many ways to say the same thing. We can change verb tense in order to change the feeling of the story. We can use different vocabulary and different phrases. And we will even break grammar rules all the time. One right answer think limits of confuses English learners. Effective communication requires flexibility, while the one right answer mentally trains students to be rigid and unimaginative. Connect to these people is another dangerous part of hidden curriculum. Fears of mistakes. This is one of the most negative and traumatizing messages taught in school. How is fear of the mistake taught? Through tests and corrections, in nearly every school all over the world, teachers regularly give quizzes and tests. The teacher asks questions and the student must provide the one right answer. Of course, the one right answer is always the teacher's answer. What happens if the student provides different answer? They're punished with a low score. Students are smart and they quickly understand that in school, mistakes are bad and must be avoided. They also understand that truth is unimportant and the best way to succeed is to simply give the answer and that the teacher wants. Even worse is when a student already feeling nervous try to speak English with the whole class listening. They're just learning, so of course they will make mistakes. When the teacher corrects the mistakes, the student is embarrassed and becomes more nervous. And eventually, most students try to avoid speaking English because the situation is so painful. By pointing out and correcting mistakes, schools punish risk taking. Little by little, they train students to avoid risk and avoid doing anything that can do perfectly. Yet, there's no perfection with English speaking. Even native speakers make more mistakes. We make grammar mistakes, we mispronounce words, we forget vocabulary words. It doesn't matter because we're focused on communicating, not on tests and grades. Of course, the fear of mistakes goes far beyond English class. After years of school, most people learn to avoid risk in most parts